to Side Part. I'm Nikki, your host, and today we're going to chat about A Court This Cruel and Lovely. I really wanted to cover the Kingdom of Lies series. I'm going to do a short book breakdown of this book because book 4 comes out on May 30th. This is a novel written by Stacia Stark, and I hope you love it if you choose to read it as much as I did. I'm going to divide this short book review, book discussion into two parts. I'm going to do a non-spoilery section, and then I'll get into like my spoilery, kind of chaotic thoughts afterwards. There's really no organization other than that, but I'll try to keep the spoiler information out at the start. So to dive right in, our female main character is Priska. We figure out really early on that there is this kingdom that is very oppressive, and she lives in this village that doesn't really have a lot of access to resources. The vibe it gave off, honestly, was very similar to like District 12, Hunger Games, Katniss kind of fighting for scraps in a way, very poor. And honestly, not a lot of knowledge is going around. All they really know is what's been filtered down through the kingdom. And we're really in the shoes of the main character, where we're kind of we know what they know. I will say the part that I liked the most was that there was multiple points of view in the story. In the beginning, I kind of felt like while it was good, I felt like it took a little, like maybe 10% to really take off. So if you're feeling like at first, like, I'm not sure if the story's for me, keep going, because all of a sudden it just kind of takes off and you're holding on to your seat. The male main character, who we meet pretty early on, truly is the embodiment of tall, dark, and morally gray. We meet him, and we know he's going to be an integral part to the story from the very beginning, and the author has you questioning from the very beginning, is he a good or bad guy? I'm going to be honest, the male main character in the story is become one of my favorite book boyfriends. Don't get me wrong, I stan a solid golden retriever archetype. I love a guy who is, a good guy. I am not somebody that only likes the morally gray characters, but the one in this story is just so fantastic and well written. There's so much depth to him. I'm on book 3 now, and I really loved watching his story evolve. And to tag on to that, there's also some really amazing side characters in the story. For me, I think I struggle a little bit when the only like plot point with the main characters is their relationship and their romance. I like watching them navigate relationships with other people. I like watching them have these really rich conversations and these connections outside of just the male main character and the female main character or the main couple. I like watching all these other things progress and evolve. So if you're someone who's really into like lovable side characters, I think you would love this story. I really like the magic system and how they kind of classified the different types of races within this book. But I don't want to go into that too deep until we get to the spoilery section, but I will talk a little bit more about that. And just a heads up, there is a fair amount of spice towards the end of this story. If you're someone who likes that, I think you'll enjoy this book. I wouldn't say it's too heavy, but if you're someone who likes to skip over that, I don't think it would impact the story in any way. I think you would still find a lot of value in this story, and you could easily just skip through those scenes and still enjoy the story as a whole, honestly. So now we're going to move into the spoilery section where I get a little bit more in depth into my thoughts about the story, particularly like the magic system. I want to talk about that first. So how magic is characterized in this book. There's essentially 3 races in this book. So there's the Fae, there's the hybrids, which are part Fae, part human. And then there's humans. So I would say that the hybrids and the Fae seem to have like similar amounts of power. I would say that on average, the Fae seem to have a lot more power, but there are some really strong hybrids as well, from what I understand in the book. And there is also I will say that there's this idea of like the corrupt. So they start off with like this taking ceremony where I think the age is like 25 or 20, I don't know, mid 20s, where they take like they give you back a piece of the power that they took from you at birth. So like when they're babies, they take the power for the kingdom because it's a way to like bolster their defenses against the Fae, who the humans have opposed themselves against. And we don't know about the hybrids yet. We just think there's humans and Fae, and the Fae are kind of characterized as this enemy. That's like the idea through this whole book. So we're reading the story and we feel like, okay, we know from the beginning it's us. Why are you taking people's power? Usually when a kingdom's taking power, nothing good comes from it. But there's this idea of the corrupt. And really early on, Prisca's identifies like, I'm one of the corrupt. Like, I still have my power. I shouldn't have it. Because the idea is once you're 25, you get part of your power restored as like a thank you for giving it to the kingdom, to the gods, as a gift, right? Like to help protect them against the Fae. So you get your power restored. So very early on in the story, Prisca's like worried that she's going to get caught, and essentially she has time-stopping capabilities. She uses that her power to help save a girl from being attacked by another man. So the girl rats her out, and very early on, her mom is like trying to save her. The guards from the kingdom catch up to them, and essentially her mom throws her off a cliff to save her into like over into this water. I don't know why she thought that was a good idea, but that's what happens. So Prisca gets saved by this group of merry men. We find out later, like the guy who saved her, his name is Galen. He is probably one of my favorite characters in the book. So the male main character's name is Lorien. And so Galen pulls Prisca out of the water, saves her from drowning, because I believe he has like a water affinity. And Lorien's on his horse and essentially is like, all right, well, she's alive. We did enough. Let's leave her. We got stuff to do. Very cold and calculating. And I think that's the first time where we're looking at Lorien and we're just like, oh, like, are you like, are you okay, bro? But that's where we start to really question like his morally grayness. Like, quite, I mean, they did save her. He didn't stop him, like Galen, from saving him because he's kind of the boss of this group. But now we're watching Prisca, and this girl like literally is fighting for her life to try to stay alive after this. They leave her there, and she's just like trying to save herself. And it's you do skip to Lorien's point of view and kind of get to his reasoning pretty quickly behind it. It doesn't hold up in my book, but his men, you start to fall in love with the side characters at this point because they're basically like, we could have helped her. This is weird. And I actually loved that they jumped to point of view so quickly and we got to see Lorien's insight because it made me like his little group, his group of men, much more, to be honest. Like I loved that these guys were kind of pushing back a little bit and questioning his judgment as their leader. I don't know. If any leader who kind of allows someone to have a little bit of a voice, even if it seems reluctant, to me is, I don't know, makes you a good guy in my book. But then he also left her after she drowned. So keep that in mind. There's this like, I kind of want to fast forward a little bit. Eventually she ends up like meeting back up with this group of men after going through it. But with her time stopping capability, he basically doesn't really say how he knows, but he doesn't think it's a bad thing she has this capability. And they decide to team up because along the way, Prisca finds out that her best friend Acinia is trapped in the dungeon. So she wants to get to the kingdom. Actually, no, she doesn't know this at this point. But essentially, she wants to get to the kingdom so she can escape. She needs to get to the capital. They need to get in without getting noticed. So they decide to use her to get in without being noticed because she can stop time. And there's a lot of tension along the way. We really get to see their relationship deepen at this point. And eventually, Tybris, Prisca's older brother, meets up with them. And the tension between him and Lorien. And we really see Lorien's like protectiveness come out at this point when Tybris meets up with them. I'm probably saying all these names wrong. Definitely saying these names wrong at this point. I don't know. This is just how they sound in my brain. I didn't listen to the audiobooks very much. So bear with me on this. But Priska and Lorien split off at this point. Lorien does his thing. Priska goes off with her brother and essentially starts plotting to free her her friend from the dungeon. This is where the story really starts to take off. Somehow Priska and her brother get jobs in the castle. Lorien is actually impersonating he's impersonating a prince from another kingdom to infiltrate the castle. And they reconnect somehow. Like, she becomes one of the ladies for the queen after some scheming and plotting on her end. He becomes this other person. Like, he's posing this other person, but to Priska, he looks the same. So they reconnect in the castle. And this is like where the tension, the spice, kind of that high stakes feeling come into play. I'm debating on I'm not going to tell you guys the ending. I think you all should watch this, but I loved watching Priska's relationship deepen with the other characters like Rythos. When Priska's plotting to free her friend, we really see like the burden she's bearing to not only like use her gifts, but also to the importance of saving the people she cares about, how she will literally sacrifice herself. And this theme of self-sacrifice keeps showing up time and time again throughout the story. So we watch Priska work really hard to save her friend. And once again, her and Lorien's interests realign. So they work together to do this. But the ending, I have two thoughts about the ending. One, when they're essentially working to like free her friend, the amount of tension you're feeling, I mean, like your anxiety's high. But even though I kind of predicted the end coming, like there was a lot of foreshadowing or like hints you could pick up, it was just one of those books where it's 3 a.m., you're finishing it, and then you're just rushing to go into book 2 because you have to know if it's like how it goes. You have to know what the dynamic is. Like it I don't want to, you know what? I don't want to tell you guys the end. I think you should read it. This was one of my favorite books this year, if I'm being completely honest. It rivaled ACOTAR for me, honestly. I love the characters. I love the way that they're all coming into their own. I think Priska's character arc is only going to deepen and get stronger. I mean, we're watching this person essentially become very sheltered, who has a very complicated relationship with her mother. I don't want to tell you any more about that because I feel like that there's some really big spoilers with like her relationship with her mother and how that kind of it kind of makes a lot of if I tell you about that, then I'm going to spoil a lot of things for the next book and the end of this book. And there's just so many other pieces I didn't go into today that really are so important, but also you might ruin the book for you. And I want you to experience that for yourself. Trust me when I say that as a romantic fantasy, this does not disappoint. I will say that I'm on book 3 and I love how it's written. I think there's, okay, if you've read Kingdom of Ash and one of those books where it just takes forever for characters to reunite or sometimes, okay, scratch that. I think that the pacing is done very well. That's what I will say. The pacing is done really well. There are a lot of points that I felt like, wow, the author is doing a really good job of making this hurt, but also letting this heal too, where sometimes I think authors just like to let it hurt for a little too long to the point where it almost is too much. And I don't feel like that author has done this yet. Yet being the opportune word. I feel like there's a lot of opportunity in the next 2 books for it to really hurt. So I'm kind of just waiting for that with bated breath. But if you are looking for a new romantic fantasy with a 4th book coming out in 2 short weeks here, I would highly recommend A Court This Cruel and Lovely by Stacia Stark. please feel free to drop any questions in the comments, and I will be back with book 2 and my thoughts on that shortly. Have a great day, guys. Thank you for listening.